Hello, welcome back to The Content Bite. We're a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, founder of the jobs board and freelance community Rachel's List. I'm also a freelancer, a journalist, copywriter, and content producer, as is my lovely co-host, Lynne Testoni. Hello, Lynne.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, good. And yes, my name is Lynne Testoni. I'm also a journalist, writer, and content producer. So now that February's here, it seems like everything's getting back into full swing and there's some sort of new routine back, happening in both our lives at the moment. So we thought we'd do a really practical session today, talking about how to keep content fresh, maybe reuse some of your old content or some of your old research and in clever and new ways. Isn't that right, Rachel?
Yes. I think, though, before we start, this could be quite a contentious episode. So we want to address the big elephant in the room.
That's plagiarism.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think so, because there'll be people out there going, oh my God, no. But look, I think that, journos are crazy if they don't keep track of what they've written about and revisit those topics. You're saving yourself time, you're saving yourself, it's just, I'm not talking like taking your old articles and giving them a spit and polish and like pitching them again and reselling them. I'm just saying taking the same topics but giving them an updated, fresh and completely new spin. Of course, you can resell your content without touching it, but you have to be doing it in a non-competing market and you have to be making it clear to the editor that it's been sold elsewhere, which is something I think we've discussed already on the podcast. That's kind of a different thing, isn't it, to what we're talking about?
We're in February now, so every year, I don't know about you, Rachel, somebody's trying to do a Valentine's Day story. And if you've done like a million Valentine's Day story, you try and think of a new way to do it. And every media outlet wants one, or every content person wants it, because people are going to be searching for Valentine's Day and people want to capitalize on that. I know in food magazines, I have done Christmas like 15 times or something over the years. So it's about trying to do the same topics, but give a fresh angle.
I think you're really right about that, because I remember my days in magazines, particularly on health magazines, they would have their editorial calendar set for the year and it would be the same every year, like particularly on mags like Good Health. And I know that a lot of journos listen who have written for Good Health, so they probably remember, May was always anti-aging, and I don't know what the rest of the months were, but I always remember the editor would say, May is anti-aging, you have to pitch us on anti-aging. But you might have done articles on anti-aging for 5 years and you're like, wow, what can I do now that's new? Or they might have had relationships in June or something like that. So you were constantly having to look at the same topics, but think of ways to do them in new and original ways, which as a journo is your job, and you've got to have that skill, I think.
And there is some sort of benefit of doing these stories because you build up knowledge and research. Like, as you know, I've been writing about interiors, and one of my clients, of course, is a roofing tile company. I've written so much about roof tiles, but something like 50 pieces of content about roof tiles, and you've got to keep coming up with new ways to talk about roof tiles, and that's tricky, but it still builds on from my the knowledge I've built up over the years. So it is much easier to write copy, but you've got to be careful you don't repeat yourself, because it's really easy, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think the same is true of content marketing. We were talking about this, weren't we? Like, if you're writing for the same types of clients, and I do writing for a lot of different kinds of finance clients or different kinds of insurance clients, and a client will come to me and say, can we do an article on X? And I'll write that. And then 3 months later, another client will say, can we do the exact same article? I'll be like, hang on, I just did that 3 months ago. But no, it's a totally different client. And sometimes you do have to think, okay, I have to write essentially the same article, but a very, very different one. So how do you do that? How do you do that, Lynne? I've got my tactics.
I guess I had a bit of an issue last week, and it was a really good wake-up call for me, because I write a lot of real estate listings and, in the same suburbs. So, and sometimes the properties are really similar. And last week, one of my clients pointed out that I'd actually used the same opener for 2 of them. And I went, oh my God. And I didn't even realize, because I'm doing so much. And I guess it was a really good check for me. And I went back, and I do have some really good records and folders and files, but now I'm actually I decided to go through and instigate a final check. Before I send something, I read things from that client and in that genre, like if it's apartments or freestanding semis or whatever they are, and to try and make sure that I haven't repeated myself, because it is really easy. And also I spent a bit of time on realestate.com, looked at a whole variety of real estate copy. So I guess that I got a whole new real estate vocab done, and I pulled out some cool phrases or some words that I like to put them in my template. And I also spent time on thesaurus.com, putting in some of those keywords that I've been using and getting different ways of saying stuff. And then it just made me sort of open my eyes and get out of that rut and try and be a bit fresher with things.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a shock, and I didn't realize I'd done it, and it's so easy to do. You write a lot of articles on superannuation. How do you find new angles and not repeat yourself?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess it comes down to always looking for the latest research. So you've got something new to say, you've got really updated stats. If you're doing content marketing that is just desk research, that's really important. The other thing that I do is I don't go back and revisit what I've written. Like, I kind of know what I want to say and I've got the research in front of me, but I find that it muddies the waters a bit for me going back to the old article, and you almost can't help but try and, structure it in the same way. So I start from scratch and then I'll compare, later to make sure they're completely different, new research, hopefully new quotes if I've had to interview someone. Yeah. I think that's really important. Like, new quotes can completely change a piece, getting a new expert, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's one of my tips. I try and include interviews as much as possible in all my stories. Sometimes if it's an interiors, I often I do a lot of case studies. So every client, whether it's somebody who uses, roof tiles, or somebody who is got a new kitchen, or even somebody, I do stuff with pets and things. So sometimes a different vet. That makes a difference, because even though the information sometimes has some similarities, everyone has a slightly different take on it and gets a different angle. And I think that gives you a different feel to it as well. And so even if the basic information is the same, like it might be about some materials used in renovation, they're similar, but each time people will use them in creative ways or say different things about that material.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely, if you can get a new interview, do it, and it will give that piece a really fresh feel. But something else that you can do is you can actually check yourself for plagiarism.
Oh, yeah, great idea.
So you could, if you were worried that your article was too similar or you're just not sure, you could plug it into, there's a tool called
Plagiarism Checker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's smallseo.com/plagiarism -checker, but we'll pop it in the little box show notes thing. There's a problem with Rachel's List blog at the moment, so look for the show notes instead on your podcast app till we get that sorted out. But yeah, that can be quite good if you want to just plug the text in and then you run it through the checker and it will just say unique for everything you've written. So that can be a really handy tool.
Yeah, I know that is a really good tool. The other thing to do is try and use an interview across a few stories, so maybe splitting up the topics. I do remember that you used to do this occasionally when I used to commission you for health articles. I remember that. Yeah. Remember a diabetes story you did?
Yes.
And you had an expert that brought up 2 points, and I'd asked you to do both topics in the article, but you felt you had enough to make it 2 articles, and you came back to me and saying, could you separate them into 2 articles? Thought, great idea, and you did, and I commissioned you for the second article. So that was a win-win for all of us, wasn't it?
That was my very sneaky trick for getting double the work and the money.
Well, it worked, and it was great because you had 1 interview and 2 really strong articles in it. The other thing is, I write a lot of stuff, and I know you do too, Rachel. I do forget what I've written. Occasionally, also the worst thing I've found is that sometimes I've seen a piece that I've written like 8 months later, for whatever reason, it's popped up. I go, oh, that's really good. Did I really write that? And I go back and I check and I think, yeah, I did. That's exactly my words. And then I forget. I mean, often it's so easy to get into a bit of a rut with your writing and realize that you're writing. I can't remember phrases I used 8 months ago because I'd be writing sometimes 10 pieces of content a week, and it's impossible. Go back 8 months. It's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned before, and I didn't jump in, but I just want to jump in about the whole carving up your transcripts to create more articles out of the one interview. I think we have talked about this on the podcast before. If you are going to do this, it can be a little bit of a minefield. So you need to ensure that you have the rights to do it and that everybody is aware that you're doing it. And by that, we mean the editor or both the editors, if you're on selling it to a different title. The interviewee, the person you've actually interviewed, you have to say this is going to go in X and Y. Are you okay with that? And the PR, if one was involved in, getting the interview or something like that. I think that's important to mention.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't matter. It might be something like you do a celebrity and they say a couple of things, and one could be about their movie coming up, but they could also mention some beauty or health tips that you think might be really good for a beauty or health magazine or website or something. And that's quite relevant. Whereas if it's a celebrity magazine, they're not interested. So, that's quite good. And it does help, particularly with larger companies like Bauer, if you split it up within the organization. So you might pitch to a health magazine in Bauer as well as an interior magazine or something. So you're not going from one publishing house to another. It might be bad if you went from Bauer and pitched it to Channel 9 or, that could be bad. So there's some ethics in that as well.
I will say though, and I know that other journalists have complained to me about this, is a lot of publishing houses are now asking for your transcripts so that they can carve them up at their end, which means you miss out on the story. And that's quite annoying, isn't it? Because you then feel, not very motivated to do a long interview. You just want to get the questions in that, because you're not being paid for any other stories that might come out of that transcript.
Yes, I think that's tricky. I've had that happen a couple of times, mostly with celebrity pieces, but that's usually, I think it's sort of okay if they've set up the interview.
Yeah.
So if you get a magazine that say we've got an interview, well, let's pretend Chris Hemsworth. And then they set it up and you do the interview and they want your transcript because they might use it later to do, particularly they might do sort of tips of the year or a little quote for their upfront pages or something like that. So that works. Yeah. But if they set it up, I think it's okay. But if they haven't set it up, I don't think it's a good idea. Yeah. If you've secured an interview with Chris Hemsworth, I don't think it's right for them to get the transcript so they can use it.
Don't give up your transcript with Chris Hemsworth. I suppose we should talk about, when you're in the situation of being a blogger or like Rachel's list and you have a lot of blog content, because that can happen, can't it? And then you've got all this blog content sitting there for years and years. Is it okay to repurpose that? Yeah.
I think it is. And also the way SEO works, sometimes if you have an older story that is quite good, but has got some outdated information, you can just update it and keep the SEO inherent in that article. Because if you've done a really popular story and it keeps doing well, but it's certainly relevant and okay to update it. Yeah, it's things like great tips and everything, but the references might be outdated or something, or there's some new research. So getting the basic thing and just, you can actually just insert new research or new products. Sometimes I do that with some of the renovation stories. I've been asked by magazines to do, great new fridges or something. They've asked me to redo the article, and basically the actual article doesn't change much, but the fridges that I mentioned have. So I will update all the models and all the information and maybe speak to the fridge companies to see if there's new things that have come in, but the actual essence of the article doesn't change a lot, because fridges haven't really changed that much. But yes, some of the relevant, there will always be new things, but some part of the story is still the same.
Yeah, I know Choice does that too. They'll sometimes come to me and say, can you update this article with this different products or more updated products? But in the case of having a blog like Rachel's List, if you've got loads of content and there are older posts that you want to update, you can do that and then write a line saying this post was updated in November 2020 or something like that. And I just think doing that can save you time writing a new one, but it can also introduce your audience to older posts that they might not have seen that still have value. So
that's important with something
fine.
something like Rachel's List, or even some of the content marketing things I've done. You might do a couple of really good things early in, as I said, 40 pieces on roof tiles. So some of the earlier pieces I've got are still relevant, but they haven't seen the light of day. So it helps them to reinvent them and push them to the front and show that back catalogue. I think it's quite good. Yeah. The other thing I try and do, if I feel sometimes you can get stale doing content in the same genre or niche. So I try and spend a bit of time in research, and I often try and look at a different way to structure a story. So the information might be very similar, but I might structure it differently. So I might do it as a listicle, or I might do it with lots of breakouts, or maybe get some pull quotes. So instead of just having quotes as part of the running copy, I pull them out and put them at the front, or get 5 different strong quotes from experts instead of running them in a story. And it's the same information, but packaged differently. And I think that people might digest it differently because of that. They actually see some of the...
Yeah, I agree. Especially in the digital world, if you have stuff that has done really well, like a blog post, that's a perfect opportunity to turn it into an ebook or a white paper, or, as you said, an infographic, and just repackage it differently. That's actually a really smart way to use your content. Or you could pull out some of the really great quotes or stats or data or whatever and turn them into social posts, like really great, beautifully designed social posts that you can easily do in Canva. So then you've got the content for your socials to go through. So it is something to think about, not to let really well-performing pieces of content stagnate as the one piece, but thinking about smart ways to repurpose them, for sure.
The other thing is, I often look at sites as Medium. I don't know if I think most people are aware of Medium.
I've got a Medium subscription.
So there's so many different articles on Medium, and I often read them and just for myself, but I like them. But sometimes I see a clever way to structure something. I wouldn't copy the content, but I think, I like the way they've listed that, or I like the way that they've structured it, or they've used a clever thing, like, they might do a Q&A or something that I think that's a clever thing that I could do with my next story on roof tiles, even though it's so reading widely, reading a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction, you often see clever ways to package something, and it could be quite a different genre or niche. And that's often a way to get you thinking about repurposing your content in a creative and new way.
Totally agree. And I think that we have pretty much come to the end of the show. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We will be back next week with another guest, won't we, Lynn?
Yes, we have a great guest next week. Yes, Tori Archbold.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about really clever ways to network. Yeah.
Yes. So we'll have that for you next week. Thanks again. And everybody, just look for the show notes on this one inside your podcast app for now until we get the blog sorted. Okay.
We love
thanks,
tech,
everyone.
don't we?
We do. Bloody technology. Okay.
Okay, Rach.
See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.